Hello everyone, welcome to an exciting new journey. The challenges that immigrants go through, no one understands them fully. I realized a little while ago that my son would never understand what we truly went through. So I want to do something to chronicle the different paths we take. We're going to be talking to different people from different cultures, and the only thing they have in common is that they've left their homelands to work in the NHS. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the podcast. I've got a very old friend here on the podcast with me today, and I'd just like to introduce. His name is actually Dr. Ben Lawrence Kemah, and I will introduce him by telling you about the first day I met Ben. He may not remember this, or he may remember it differently. I can see him smiling. So the first day I met Ben was actually the first day I was in the UK to start my job, and one of the service managers took me to the surgical assessment unit, and there was this guy typing furiously in a pink shirt, typing furiously on the computer, and he turns to me, and I won't name the service manager, but she's very nice. She's like, let me introduce you to Ben. He's one of the SHOs, and he can just show you how things work. And then she left me. Uh, so I stood there. Ben came out. He was very, very, very nice. Greeted me, and he was like, "Oh, which firm are you joining?" And I said, vascular surgery." He's like, "Oh," and that was it. I think that was the sentence. That was the first sentence that Ben said to me, and I think it was filled with quite a lot of foreboding. But in actual fact, he was a great support to me during the first few days. We built up a very, very very, very solid friendship based on understanding of each other's culture. I have learned a lot from Ben, and maybe he's learned a few things from me along the way. But in order to start off with the official things, so Ben is one of the co-founders of Hero Cameroon, which is a non-profit organization. So he's also the current serving chief executive, along with being one of the co-founders of this amazing organization. And what they try to do is to bridge the gap between affordability and delivery of appropriate healthcare for the people of Cameroon who maybe can't afford the services that they so rightly deserve. They're doing some amazing work. I see him share a lot of things on social media, and we'll get more into what they do as we go on. But he's also an ST4 trainee in Obs and Gynae, and he's special interest in GynaeOncology. So he's moving towards the right side. But I'm going to pause there, and I'll let you take it from there. I'll let you introduce yourself, Ben. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Asen. Thank you. I wondered what that first day sounded like, but not too bad. So my name is Ben Lawrence Kemah. I'm a doctor. I'm originally from Cameroon, from Buea, southwest region in Cameroon, where I literally spent every bit of my education, primary, secondary, completed medical school in Cameroon. And then after medical school, straight out of medical school, came to the UK, completed the master's, and then worked as a junior clinical fellow on SHO with Asad, where I met Asad, my dear friend Asad, who, as rightly said, learned quite a lot from him as well. Going to training from there, Obs and Gynae, mostly because of the obstetrics. As a medical student, caught a lot of babies, quite enjoyed my placement in obstetrics. And then, somehow drifted from obstetrics, which I still love and enjoy, and doing both, but looking forward to do oncology in the future, God willing. Yeah, that's a bit about me.
Absolutely. Ben, I've wanted to ask you this question for a long time because I remember sitting in that dingy office preparing the MDT lists for for those meetings, and I wanted to ask you. I remember we used to talk about life, and we used to talk about where we would be in 10 years. Granted, it's not 10 years down the line. It's about four or so years. So we're halfway there. I've got a kid now. Life has moved on for both of us. I remember that we used to talk about things that we would accomplish and things we would do. How would you say you feel about how time's treated you? Are you happy with how time has gone?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. I'd say yes. I mean, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that wherever you find yourself, if you've done the most that you can do, if you've done all that you think you can do, wherever you find yourself, that's the right place for you. And we try, you and me both were the same kind of people. We try to correct everything or to control every factor. But I think my lesson over the past kind of 5 years is that when things happen, especially when you don't want them to, or when you expect it different, when things happen to you, you might not immediately recognize that this is the best things for you. But in the long run, it turns out most times, anyways, in my very limited experience so far, that those things work exactly how you want them to be or how you would have wanted them to be. But at that time, you just didn't see them. So I would say yes. I mean, a lot of things that I planned to have turned out differently. But one thing that I'm very sure is that 10 years or 20 years down the line, those things will be exactly what I needed and the things that were good for me. So I have no regrets. I planned a few things and they haven't worked out quite well, but I have no regrets and I'm quite confident that in the future, it's going to align. That's what I think.
It's about working to your hardest degree and accepting the rest, isn't it? Which is, I think, a very good way to go through life. Now, Ben, before we get into the actual questions, I think I haven't done justice to Hero. I think you should just talk about Hero a little bit. I think people deserve to know about the great work they're doing.
Yeah, so HERO stands for Health Education Research Organization, which is a labor of love for myself because I think when we started HERO, we were just medical students. We didn't have any money or anything to set up the right structures, the registrations, the websites and everything. But it started from just observational evidence about the things that we thought we could make a difference with. As medical students, we thought it were simple things that were cost effective, didn't need a lot of money around education. But we also thought that we could create a little cohort of people who are now HERO members that thought differently, viewed life differently. We could mentor ourselves and provide a sort of guidance and kind of career stewardship that we didn't have. And so we set out about kind of 7 years ago now. Three of us or four of us, we were, you know, going to local communities, educating people, doing testing for things that we could do rapidly at kind of a population level, education, vaccinations, everything that we could do. And gradually we started sort of getting more people on board. And we're now about 40, 45 people. And we can get, if we have a big project, we can get up to 100 people if we wanted to, all doing the same thing, working towards the same goals. But I think perhaps what is very obvious to people is the sort of things that we're doing and the numbers to go to the website and the number of people that have impacted and those sort of things, I think is very important. One of the things that I'm most happy about is that we've created a group of people that think the same. And that difference in thinking, for me, I think that perhaps is the mentorship and way of thinking, what we call a hero mindset. For me, I think that's the greatest achievement. If you want to change the world, you need to start changing the world by changing yourself. But if you change yourself and change the people around you and create the right environment so those people can impact your own microcosms in a similar way, I think is very powerful. And so there is a health education, which was our niche. There was a research that we do that informs the interventions that we carry out. But for me, most importantly, I think we're creating very solid people that are going to impact the world. I can't just wait to see what's going to happen in 20 years' time with all these people. Yeah.
I can't wait either because, as you said, change begets change, and it's about creating that self-sustaining circle of goodness, of kindness, of doing good in the world. So I pray it all works out. So let's dive in. You know the general outline of these questions. We're going to be starting about asking you about your hometown. My personal experience of Cameroon is just this one guy I met who's very intellectual, driven, ambitious. So I'm talking about you. So just tell me, why don't you start by telling me what you miss most about your hometown, about Buea?
Yeah. So I mean, what I miss about Cameroon, those are not tangible things. They're all intangible things that I can't tell that I miss the food because you can get a bit of the food around. I live in Birmingham now, so restaurants everywhere. It's just the intangible things. I last went to Cameroon just before the start of the pandemic, and it's just about the air, just the climate, the noise from all the taxis, and seeing the same people, the same buildings that you saw as a child growing up. I'm kind of heavily burdened by the nostalgia of home, and what I miss most really is, I mean, I miss that. I miss the. It's a small city. Literally, you could walk through the whole of way from the start to the end in about 6 hours or less, or thereabout. So I miss that. I miss the same kind of restaurants, bars, and everything. Like if you lived down south, like right in a long time, you get used to all of those things. That's what I miss. just from a general point of view. But I also miss an environment where you feel completely free, an environment where you're not restricted. I think one of the things about going away from home is that you can't help that feeling that this is not home, and you miss that sense of home. That not in Buea, which is where I spent literally most of my life, and all of it really, but for bits of it that I was away from home. So yeah, that's it really.
So what I'm hearing is you miss the constants. You miss the the absolute certainty of where things are when you need them to be. So I get that. But what about those constants here in your life here? Have you managed to experience that?
Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a bit of my family, so which is always nice. But a great deal of my friends are still in Cameroon. My mom is still in Cameroon most of the times. So I miss those people. So these days, what happens is that yeah, there's someone that you grew up with has passed or is getting married. So the good news and the bad news, and you don't get to share that with the people. So you miss that. The people that my childhood friends, I can't remember the last time I saw. We do speak from time to time on Facebook, but after a while you start to forget how it looks like and how those people look like, and you've not been part of their aging. So I suppose you're going to grow with Adam, and you're going to see every bit of Adam, and then at some point Adam is going to sort of go away. So for me, Boya is sort of my home and my child, and I've lived there all my life, and then I find that things are happening to Boya that I'm not a part of, and you miss that. You feel like you want to be part of it, but obviously you've got a new home, which is not that place. So I miss all of that, and I miss that jelly. Um, no matter what happens, and I've spent 26 years of my life there, no matter what happens, I'm never really going to be able to say that anywhere else is home, no matter how long I live in that place, because it doesn't hold my baby steps.
That's beautiful. Um, so Ben, what prompted the move to the UK?
Yeah, the move to the
As
UK.
raw and as unfiltered as you'd like it to be.
Yeah, funny enough, I thought about it. I mean, not because of any, I don't have any compelling push or pull factor, and I always say that you know as immigrants, that there's usually a push or pull factor. For me, I just thought I'd never been to one of those externships or observerships abroad, so probably witnessed like what is a state of the art practice. But I would say that one of the hospices where I did my internship, one of the central hospitals in Douala, was quite a standard hospital, and I think that the standard there is pretty good, better than I would say where some UK hospitals. I would say that because it's a parastatal, it's quite well funded. But I had an idea of what I thought was standard of care, standard of practice, of what good medicine looks like, and that's what I was looking for. I wanted to go to somewhere where I could be a kind of textbook doctor that I dreamt of. So I could have machines, I could have the CT scans, the MRIs, and all those things that I'd never even seen. I just read of. So that's what really pushed me. And obviously, I had a bit of my family abroad, and they tell you about the niceness of the life, And when they come to visit, it's always very nice, and they come with your nice cars and everything. So I dreamt about that, and I wanted to have that for myself. So I just had that. I think throughout medical school, and I was always fascinated by that. I wanted to live to have that life. I wasn't running away from home as such, but I thought, I'm going to have I'm going to be this kind of Western doctor, and I'm going to have lots of money, or and have a good life. So that was it. I left. I finished in July of 2015, and in September of that year, I left. So a month later. So I've been planning a long time, and I think part of it also is just true to who I am. I am someone who's always been very self-motivated. I wanted to move. I made a lot of plans before I finished school. Spoke to quite a lot of people, made contacts, and so I left in 2015, in September 2015, to start my master's in public health at the University of Nottingham. So that was it. And I thought about this question had a long, and I think that was the reason I wanted to move.
So Ben, that question actually brings up another question for me, and I'll just try to sort of explain it to you. So your driving factors change. So your driving factors, which you've talked about now, are the ones that drove you when you were in Cameroon, when you were thinking about this. you've done a master's in public health, and now you're obviously in training to become a consultant. Have you felt like your driving factors have changed during this process, or do you think that the core factors remain the same with some added elements?
Yeah, I think very much so. The fact is, my motivation to leave Cameroon has changed from when I came here. I mean, I wanted to leave for to better myself, really. But I think these days, most times, I still want to be better for myself. I think the best way that I can contribute to myself and to my society is to be better in myself. But I have a more holistic view of life. I feel that I can contribute to my society, so I can better myself, but I also think I can give back. And a lot about my motivation these days is to get myself to elevate myself to a point where I can have the gravitas to be able to impact other people and to give back. And I think I enjoy my job. I enjoy being an obstetrician. I think being delivering babies, your mom is an obstetrician, you can have a chat. I think it's such a fulfilling job that I didn't actually understand to what extent it can be fulfilling, just be able to give those parents what they have. But I think beyond that, beyond helping individual families and bringing the babies, so I want to do more. And my motivation these days, my kind of driving force is towards things that develop me professionally, less so. We're going to get there somehow. We're hard workers, but also finding a way to develop myself, to develop the right networks, to be able to create a platform for myself, to give me the gravitas to be able to give back to society. And it answers to that question which I've posed to myself now that I'm older about what is my purpose, what is it that I want to do. And what I want to do is not just to be a Western doctor. It's not as appealing as it sounded a few years ago. It's about impacting other people and beyond helping individual families, just helping the world, just making it a better place. There's so much sadness and so much good that we can do, isn't it?
100%. And Ben, you're a gynecologist. I've got to ask you this question. The only other person who's in obs and gynae and trained in the UK is my mum, and I'm not going to ask her this question. But Adam Kay wrote a book. Have you read it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What did you think about that? Especially because obviously he's left the NHS and obviously he trained in the obs and gynae system. So your thoughts on his experience?
I think that there is a bit of his perspective there, how you look at it. So you and I can go through a similar experience, but your interpretation of that experience is different. So there are a lot of truths to that. To say that I think that the standards of safety have changed. So whilst obs and gynae, indeed a lot of the practice in medicine, maybe just about 20 years ago, was you could run solo as a registrar and do quite a lot, even in your specialty. These days there's quite a lot of safety nets, and the safety culture has changed completely. So I think that the responsibility of an obstetrician it's very enormous for you to look after this, especially in complex units when you're looking after complex women, heart problems, diabetes, kidney problems, transplant patients, and other things. That responsibility is quite heavy, and it can weigh quite heavily on you. So I can see where he's coming from, and the stress of it is real. So I think that for you to be an obstetrician, especially not just a gynecologist, an obstetrician most especially, you need to be a certain character to be able to deal with tragedy. Our outcomes are expected to be good. And when you measure outcomes with success, people do not understand when things go wrong. And even for you, because the weight of that is very enormous. So if you think that something has happened, through your fault or not your fault, where an outcome for a child is bad, it weighs quite heavily on you. And you can see how his interpretation of all of those things, it's quite vivid, and it's quite, I think for lack of a better word, sometimes dramatic and scary. I think it's still very true, because we deal with that on a daily basis in the labor ward, but also, there's quite a lot of safety nets, and we have way more good outcomes and good experiences than we have bad experiences, and the bad experiences are there. And part of being an obstetrician and having that character, you can talk to your mom about that, is being able to recognize that as MI5, you will probably touch most of the terrorist plots in the world, but a few of them probably going to go south, isn't it? And a few things, bad things will happen, and it's just the nature of it. I suppose as a dermatologist, you don't have to deal with people dying, babies or families not meeting their babies. But throughout the whole scope of ops and gynae, from preconception care up to delivery, intrapregnant care, and delivery and postnatal care, there's avenues for so many things to go wrong, and you need to have that kind of character, and you need to have the support, which I think that the college and the country as a whole, with the current safety climate, has done quite a lot to
Good.
address.
I'm glad. And your work environment, do you feel it's a supportive work environment generally?
Yeah, I would just say that if I'm going to speak honestly, I would say that I think that generally because of there's quite a lot of pressure on the NHS, and that pressure isn't evenly distributed among all specialties. Where safety is particularly crucial, and there'll be things like obs and gynae, um, amongst other things. Where the pressure on A&E, where the pressure is particularly crucial, then I think that we feel the blunt of any sort of extra pressure. So then that pressure kind of percolates and translates in different ways into, and even in people's personal lives. So I think it's generally the kind of stress levels are heightened, sustainable. But perhaps we need to do other things to address a few things to make it better, to make it as it was maybe in the short-term future.
Well, I'm obviously biased, but I think I've seen my mom do this for what 30, 40 odd years, and I would say that this is probably the most important specialty in medicine or surgery, given that you deal with two lives at one time, or sometimes even more than two actually. Is high stress environment. You've got to make decisions, and your decisions, as you said, will impact lots of people for the duration of their lives, not just for that moment. So props to you and for all that you do. Moving on to the next question now. So the next question is, so what's been your biggest challenge, and what have you learned from migrating to a new place? So you can answer in whatever order.
Oh, my biggest challenge. I need to start with my biggest challenge, I think, because I think this is a very
Yeah.
crucial question. Now, I think one of the things that, and I think you can weigh in on this because I would like you to weigh in this because I'm being interviewed. I think the biggest challenge is to move away from your ground, what I call your ground of neutrality. When you're home, when you're in Lahore, when I was in Buea, you were in a place which was free of prejudice or bias. You were a place where you were culturally in sync with everyone around you, and no one is going to be sarcastic, and you don't get the sarcasm, and no one is going to make statements where you don't get it. And your competence is assumed. I think not generally, but sometimes I think generally for most immigrants, I think this will not be an outrageous statement to say that to a certain extent your incompetence is assumed and then you have to prove that otherwise. But what I always say to people who are immigrants is that when I try to encourage, when I have these conversations with people, especially people that have just moved, and I'm sure we had this conversation when we started, that the people that migrate are not necessarily the most intelligent, but usually most of the brightest, so the creme de la creme of wherever they've come from. And you come to a society where your incompetence is almost assumed, and you need to prove yourself, but the playing field is not level because all the advantages that you built as a medical student and all the connections and all the good things that you did and being a good medical student in the ward, all those things immediately dissipate, and then you come to a place where you need to prove yourself, and you almost need to start from scratch. So you feel you carry this sense that you could perhaps never really achieve all of your potential because the foundations have changed, and you're not having to build new foundations. So I struggled with that, and I thought to myself, well, I think I've got high above, kind of slightly above average intelligence to be able to be the best at that I can, and I thought my communication was good. And then you come to learning a new standard of communication. You come to having to prove yourself. All those things. I think I found it extremely challenging, and it's something that I still find challenging. Even as the culturalization has become better, you've learned more about the British society. You can't help to feel that there's some sort of unspoken, maybe someone can argue those things are self-imposed, but some unspoken hindrances which are cultural and which are just inherent to the fact that you're an immigrant. I think there's quite a lot of them. For example, if you were home, advantages that you get because you're home, those things are not there. And so I have wondered what I would have achieved if I had all of my full potentials and all of the kind of supports that you have, like you would have back home. And it's challenging for you to go through life, with that sort of wonder about if you're working at potential and what if you had all the right elements to reach potential. I think moving forward, your son Adam is going to have a better chance of reaching their potential. And it is true, indeed, down the line, generations down the line for immigrants, that as that culturation gets better and they get a better mastery of this society, it's just going to become better and better for them. But the person who has to do that sacrifice is you. The person that has to bear the brunt of the challenges is you, to give your offspring a better chance of the future. What have I learned? I've learned so much. I think Cameroon is a pretty homogeneous, heterogeneous in its own ways because we've got 234 ethnic groups, but we're mostly the same people. Most people are 99% of people are Black. Coming to the UK, one of the things I would say is that if I didn't meet you and meet people like you, I wouldn't have had a perspective about Lahore. I'll probably have an outsider's perspective based on the media, which, as you know, is quite biased. It's quite, filtered. The voices are quite uniform. People, it's not varied, so you don't get a true picture of what it is. But I've spoken to people like yourself. I've spoken to a very, very inspirational Pakistani doctor, Mr. Bukhari. And when you speak to those people and they tell you about the beauty of Lahore, and they tell you about Islam, and they tell you about what Islam means to them and their own interpretation of Islam, it negates in a very positive way any other interpretation that might be depicted in the media more loudly, isn't it? Because negatives sometimes tend to be a bit loud. And I always say to people that Assad is the model Muslim. Yeah, but then subsequent to you, I've actually met
Too much pressure.
I've met a few people who carry their religion in a different way. And I think it's taken me that move away from home to be able to meet people and to gain this experience in real life. And that would be the same for you, as a Muslim, but then Jews and all other religions meeting and then realizing that deep within, I think we're just the same people. We feel the same emotions of pain, sadness, and love. We feel we have aspirations, we dream, we want to have a family. We all want the same. We want the same things. We're not different at all. And sometimes when you live in your microcosm, which is your country, and you see the same people, it's very hard for you to grasp that concept, and you need to sort of be very open-minded to get it. And for me, it's been very easy. I think the other thing that I've gained as well is the British culture. I think that you can say what you like about what was Britain's colonial past, but I think it's done quite a lot to try and make amends. Is it ever going to be enough? We don't know. But a lot of the values that are espoused by Britain are good values, and values that are desirable, and values that you would want for Adam and I would want for my child as well. So I think that's just kind of the short form of what I've learned. So the culturalization in many different aspects, and just meeting different people, and just the life experience, going away from home, different set of challenges. We spoke about the challenges, but so far we've been up to them, and I think that we'll continue being matching those challenges. But it's giving you a chance to have a different kind of perspective of life, to feel life differently in a way that you would perhaps never feel if you didn't move away from home, for me anyways. Yeah.
Ben, that was a very moving answer. I am definitely not a model Muslim, but there's a few things that I'd actually like to talk about. It's very, very important. I was sort of constructing them in my mind as you went on very eloquently, if I may add. So you talk about. I think what you've basically touched on is the fact that travel opens your eyes. Travel or going into a place where you are exposed to multiple different stimuli, and in this case cultural stimuli, exposes your belief system in a manner of speaking, and that certainly did that for me. When you're in a place of comfort, in a place where you're not challenged by being able to understand new people, being able to demonstrate your own emotional intelligence, you get very comfortable, as you've rightly said, and you don't challenge your own beliefs. And I've certainly had to do that for myself. And you learn from people around you. I've said this many times. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast with so many people from different countries, different cultures, different races, is because these are all my friends, and I value the diversity of my friendships in the NHS more than anything I've valued since I've come here. I value the education, I value the training, I value all of those things. I value the life, and we'll talk about what you mentioned about first generation immigrants paving the way for their children. It's very important, but this is what I value the most, and I feel like this is what's led to the most personal growth for me as a person. About the thing with Adam having different challenges, Iram and I talk about this a lot. So my dad was an immigrant, my mum and dad were both immigrants from a different country, not this country, but when you grow up with a childhood as scattered as I did, in different places, meeting different people, having so many different friends, you don't have a base. And I think one of the things that I try to do is to provide my son with the base. But as you said, we can go back to Maslow's pyramid of self-actualization here, where where you have all the ingredients responsible for a successful self-actualized human being. And as first generation immigrants, we frequently don't have that. There's, one small component missing. And it's about how you make peace with that. So the way I make peace with that is, I'm doing this for a greater purpose. That's my way of dealing with it. That's my way of coming around and trying to make justifications for my um, I'm not sad about my journey at all. Don't get me wrong, but there are times, as you said, that you question, because if you're like me and you, we do question that, don't we? So yeah, so the way I make my peace with that is that I know that this is greater than me, if that makes sense. So I was really grateful that you touched upon that. I didn't plan on talking about that today on this podcast, but I'm actually really grateful that you brought that in. Um, what do you think about that?
Absolutely, I completely, and I like the way you put it. You said, I think you said that the journey to self-actualization to you as a first generation immigrant vis-a-vis Adam New is different, and I think that trying to get there is much more challenging. And you've talked about how you make your peace with it. I suppose those people listening to this podcast maybe in 20 years' time that question how, think about it, in a similar place like you and myself, it's two things you've said. The journey is more difficult, but you need to find a way of making peace with it. It's really powerful. I like that you've said it. So I'm going to interview you on your podcast. Tell me about Lahore. Tell me about your experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one other thing. So this podcast, the way it was born was the idea was entirely that I was thinking about Adam. Actually, I was thinking about Adam. I was like, as you said, a few years down the line, couple of decades, is he going to know what we went through? Is he going to know what I went through? I mean, Ben, are your kids going to know what you went through? Well, now they will. So it's one of those things. It's one of those things. Like, it's this permanent record forever and ever. So yeah, it's about the journey, and about making peace with it, as you said. But yeah, let's see. Maybe a few years down the line, this is much bigger than us. So the last question, Ben, and I love this question because it allows me to get to know people a bit better. People I don't know. I know you, of course, but I haven't met you in 4 years. So this is my way of trying to catch up in a microcosm of this conversation. So, Ben, if you go back in time and give yourself some advice, what would you say?
Oh yeah, so this is actually a very good question, and I had to think hard and long about it to come, to do the question justice, because I think it's such a good question. A couple of things really. I think for me, it's about, I'll go back to myself and say to myself that whatever you go through at any point in time, good or bad, it's very easy for you to remember the memories of it, but forget the emotions and what those emotions meant to you. So something very good happened to you, you probably felt motivated, and something bad happened, you fell down. So going back and just saying to yourself that actually it's going to be fine. Just keep doing the right things, and don't lose track. Don't waste your time. If you thought to yourself that I've come to a point that I said to myself, oh wow, I don't think I've read as many books as I wanted. And just go back to yourself to say, well, actually, it's never too late to start. If you wanted to read books and you felt you didn't have time, a page is something I do now. So a page a day is good enough. Go back to yourself and tell your old self, every day counts, every moment counts. There is a tendency sometimes for us just to coast through lives, and there's certainly, I've tried to be very intentional about my own life, but sometimes you might just find yourself coasting through life and not actually thinking about every bit of it. It's quite intensive. But I think I think the people that have taken the most out of life have actually given into life a lot. If you're a monk somewhere in Tibet, you have to give a lot into meditating for you to get the most out of it. And so it's about being intentional, but it's about thinking about it and saying, what is the lesson of this part of my life? And so these days, if I had something at work, if I had something socially, if I disagreed with a friend or something, or if I saw a conversation on the internet which wasn't quite, I didn't quite agree with, I think in the past I would kind of interact with that differently, and I've learned how to approach these things differently, and just to see what are the lessons, what is it that I'm learning from here, what is this thing trying to teach me? I go back to myself and say that to myself. I'll say to myself, be patient. Things will work out well. I would literally think about failures in a sort of a less kind of aggressive way. Like, it's not the end of the world. It's all right. And even we say to yourself, like, oh, you're a high achiever, you're not used to failing. All of that is not really accurate as such. All of those things is fine. Life is a sine wave. There's a lot of ups, a lot of downs, a bit of mundaneness, everything is just fine. But those downs, a combination of it, and you need to be accepting of the lows of the sine wave as you are of the highs, and just realize that it's going to be part of it. I'm going to talk to myself about mental resilience and the fact that it's not a perfect world, and that do not be burdened by the world, but do not think only of yourself in the world and those kind of things, and think about them actively. And all of those things really are things that when I go back and I look at my young self worrying about things, losing sleep over things, not working hard enough, not trying to control the variables as best as I can without being stressed about it. I try and do that now, but I get a sense that, oh, I've lost so much time worrying, lost so much time not doing this and not doing all the things I would have done to improve myself, to improve or to increase my chances of success towards that journey to self-actualization. So that's it, really. It's a very powerful question. Thanks.
With an equally powerful answer. There's two parts to that actually. So the first part, you talk about what is the sunk cost fallacy. So there's two ways of looking at that. So the first way is that you say, I've invested so much time into this. I have to see this through, which is why some people you may see stick with something that's not working out for them. If I give you an example of your field, let's say you've got someone who's trying to become a surgeon. Okay, they're not loving their job, they're not loving the process, however it is, but they keep sticking at it because they made that decision, say 10 years ago or something like that. So that's one of the explanations of the sunk cost fallacy, and the other is what you touched on. So there's two ways of looking at it. Now the second part of your answer, you talk about going back in time and telling yourself to not worry too much about the other things. I think I've personally changed a lot over the years, and I do relate to that quite a lot, because you realize at the end of the day what's important, and it's about telling yourself I love the sine wave example. I usually say that it's a marathon, not a sprint, but I love the sine wave example. And I think you've also touched a bit on imposter syndrome. So we've got this shadow of doubt hanging over us, because we still can't believe how far we've come. And I think in those lows, it is very important to tell yourself this will be over, and there will, good times will come. When you're stuck in traffic, the traffic will dissipate. You will have a smooth ride. And when you're in that smooth ride, is then that you need to be grateful, because that's when you realize you've come through something. You will go through hardships again, and you will come out of it. Yeah.
Absolutely, completely agree. It is. I think you need to be grateful in the lows and the highs, because they're all part of the journey, aren't they? I think.
Absolutely. They shape you as much as the highs shape you.
I think that the lows do a better job at shaping you than the highs,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're complacent, isn't it? One of the things that I do, I'm sure you do that as well. So we do a lot of thinking about sight, isn't it? You start to see life in those little snippets of it that to you may be inconsequential. Then you get a greater appreciation of the things that you've got. And I think gratitude, it gives you is liberating. It gives you kind of peace. And you look at the things that you've got, isn't it? I want more, but have you stopped to think about the things that you have? And all those things help you as you grow older. I think age calms you down, because as you grow older, you get a lot calmer, don't you? You feel like things are a lot more under control.
You start to accept more, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. Ben, it's been lovely catching up with you. I mean, we could go on forever. I've instantly been transported to that room where it's the two of us preparing that list for the next day. It was fantastic. And honestly, it's always so great talking to you that I feel like I could just go on forever. I mean, we don't necessarily have to do one episode. We've got to do another one, maybe, as I said, with the Vascular Boys, proper podcast episode with all of them. We'll make sure that happens. But I'd just like to end on the note that I will share some links to Hero Cameroon. I think it's fantastic work that they're doing, and if you could just check their social media out and see if there's any way you could help. You could be making a difference to a lot of lives in the world. And I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I mean, I said, one of the things you said, which I completely agree with, resonates with me 110%, is that I miss everything that we've gotten so far, the culturalization, the training and everything, and the new life. One of the most important things for me is the friendships that we've built over the years. And for you, my friend Asset, one of the vascular boys. It's been a pleasure. I do not take this for granted. I think some idea as brilliant as it's going to come from someone like yourself, visionary, very much a thinker, in touch with the environment and with the world. So thank you very much for inviting me. I feel very privileged to be able to share my story with the world, and I hope someone else gets a bit of perspective or a bit of understanding of what it feels like to come from a little town in Buea in Cameroon. Looking forward to that vascular reunion, and long may the podcast continue, and looking forward to reading and listening to more of the stories from the other guys. It's been a pleasure so far. Cheers, mate.
Thank you very much, Ben. Cheers.